Rollins turned, half a smirk returning to his face as he took a slow stride back toward the ring. He left Breakker and Reed standing halfway up the ramp, confused but watching. He paced slowly, deliberately. The crowd began to stir again, some booing, some warning, others waiting to see if this was just another Rollins bluff. It wasn't. Rollins stopped at the bottom of the ramp. Looked up at Roman. Roman didn't move. Then Rollins shouted, "No Mike," but the camera caught it. "You think I'm scared of this?" He stepped forward, one boot on the ring steps. "Jay? Naomi? You think this is a threat?" He climbed the rest of the way onto the apron. Reigns motioned for him to enter, but Rollins didn't bite. He locked eyes with Reigns and grinned. It wasn't confidence. It was calculation. That's when it hit, the first strike. Braun Breakker exploded into action from the ramp, launching himself at Jey Uso like a missile. Caught off guard, Jey took the full brunt of a shoulder block and was sent sprawling to the mat. Bronson Reed barreled in next, charging through Naomi like a truck. She fell hard against the ropes, crumbling into a heap as the ring erupted into chaos. Rollins slid under the ropes at that exact moment and hit Roman from behind with a running knee to the spine. The crowd screamed. Some in shock. Some in fury. Some in bloodlust. This wasn't a match. This was a sanctioned mugging. Rollins pounced on Reigns, raining fists down on the back of his head while Breakker and Reed joined the assault. Jey tried to get up, but Breakker kicked him square in the ribs. Reed picked up Naomi and flung her into the turnbuckle with horrifying force. Heyman was outside the ring, barking like a field general. "Now! Stay on him! No mercy!" The commentary team was scrambling. "What the hell is going on here? This is a trap. A damn ambush." Roman, dazed, tried to get to a knee, but Rollins grabbed a handful of his hair and screamed directly in his face. "You think you're untouchable? This is my world now." He slapped Reigns hard across the face. Twice. Reigns didn't flinch. Even through the assault, the crowd began chanting. "Roman! Roman! Roman!" Rollins backed up and called for the stomp. Breakker held Reigns in position. Rollins bounced off the ropes and charged. And got cracked in the mouth with a Superman punch out of nowhere. Reigns, still on one knee, swung with the kind of desperation that turns into destiny. The connection was clean. Rollins flipped midair and landed hard, his limbs flailing. Breakker charged, but Reigns dropped him with a low spear that took both men off their feet. Reed grabbed Naomi again and tried to hoist her up, but this time she twisted in midair and caught him with a head scissors that flung him into the turnbuckle. Jey came alive. Crawled to his feet. Hit Breakker with a running super kick that sent him tumbling through the ropes. Reigns pulled himself up slowly, blood trickling from the side of his mouth. He wiped it with his forearm, turned, and locked eyes with Rollins again, who was crawling for the ropes. "You want to be king?" Roman shouted. He lifted Rollins by the throat and planted him with a thunderous runnage. "You better learn how to bleed for it." Outside the ring, Paul Heyman was screaming into a headset. "Get security out here. Get someone down here now." He knew. He saw it clearly now. This wasn't about one-upmanship. This was about war. Back in the ring, Naomi had taken to the second rope and dropped a leg across Reed's throat as he tried to get up. She rolled away, popped to her feet, and screamed back at Heyman, "You made this happen." Jey followed with a top rope splash onto Breakker, who was just starting to rise. The crowd was back in full frenzy. "Let's go Roman. New Shield. YET." Roman paced like a lion inside the ropes. He stopped Rollins as he tried to get to his feet. Rollins had nowhere to go. No mic. No words. Just bruises. Reigns grabbed him by the wrist and spun him around. Rollins, out of instinct, tried for a cheap shot, missed, and took another Superman punch square to the jaw. He dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. Roman stood over him, breathing hard, sweat running down his brow. He looked around at the chaos his return had caused. And for a moment, he let it sink in. This was exactly what he wanted. Not revenge. Message. He turned to the camera and raised 3 fingers. Not 1. Not 2. 3. Then pointed them down. The Shield. But evolved. Naomi climbed into the center of the ring and joined him. Jay followed. The crowd surged. Fans at ringside began pounding the barricades in rhythm with the drumbeat that once accompanied their warpath. Boom. 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 Security finally ran down the ramp. Referees. Producers. The cavalry had arrived, too late. But they weren't trying to eject Roman. They were pulling Rollins, Breakker, and Reed out of the ring like body collectors after a street fight. Heyman backed away slowly, still shouting orders to no one. His face drained of color, pure disbelief written across every wrinkle. Rollins, semi-conscious, looked back once as he was dragged up the ramp. He saw Roman. He saw Jay. He saw Naomi. And for the first time in years, he looked afraid. Not shaken. Not concerned. Afraid. Because he didn't just lose the upper hand tonight. He lost control of the narrative. Back in the ring, Roman grabbed the mic for a final word. Seth. I told you I wasn't alone. He turned to Jay. Then to Naomi. We built the house you're squatting in. He stepped over the fallen briefcase that had tumbled from Rollins' grip. And now we're kicking you out. He dropped the mic. The Shield pose returned. Roman, Jay, and Naomi, center ring, fists out, shoulders squared. A new era. A new faction. And a new enemy. The crowd chanted one last time as the scene faded to black, believe in the Shield. The unmasking, Jay and Naomi. There's something sacred about silence in professional wrestling, not the scripted kind, but the real thing. The kind that hits when a crowd full of thousands stops shouting and just watches. Breath held. Heart racing. Unsure of what's coming next, but fully aware it's going to change everything. That's the silence that followed the first 2 strikes. The hooded figures moved like ghosts through smoke. One launched off the ropes, connected with a perfect superkick to Braun Breakker. The other collided with Bronson Reed using pure momentum, turning her body into a weapon and sending him stumbling like he'd been hit by a freight train. It wasn't the chaos that silenced the crowd, it was the precision. The familiarity. The cold, rehearsed violence of warriors who'd trained for this moment in the shadows. Rollins hit the canvas. Breakker crumbled. Reed staggered. And then the reveal began. The first figure stepped over Breakker's broken form. The hood fell back on its own. A pause. Then recognition. The first spark was lit before the name was said. One fan screamed it before the commentary team even did. That's Jay. The crowd erupted. Not just in volume, but in realization. In narrative. In connection. The camera panned tight on Jey Uso's face, sweat already beading down his brow, a fire in his eyes that hadn't been there since he walked away from the bloodline months ago. No more torn loyalty. No more second guessing. The man who once said I'm out was now back, and with purpose. Michael Cole nearly jumped out of his seat on commentary. That's Jey Uso. That's Jay. Jay is back with Roman. Pat McAfee followed, voice cracked with excitement. This is insanity. This is war. That's family standing together again. But the reveal wasn't over. The second figure stood over Naomi, still masked, still cloaked. For a heartbeat, the crowd froze again. Then she pulled the hood back with both hands. And the building exploded. Naomi. No entrance lights. No glow sticks. No feel the glow energy. Just Naomi. Unfiltered. Unapologetic. Dangerous. She stood tall, unblinking, her face stoic and intense as she looked around at the chaos. Her eyes met Roman's across the ring. And she nodded. The message was clear, I'm here. I've chosen. I'm with you. The WWE universe flipped. Chants rolled through the arena with no rhythm, no script. Just instinct. Naomi. 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 Y-E-T. 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 In the center of the ring, Rollins dragged himself up onto one knee. He looked around and saw it, the tide had turned. Not just the physical battle, but the psychological war. For weeks, he mocked Roman Reigns for being left alone. Claimed the bloodline was shattered. Declared Roman finished. Now, standing above him, were three figures that proved the opposite. Roman. Jey. Naomi. Not the original Shield. But something more dangerous. Something that could rewrite history while honoring it. The commentary team tried to catch up. Naomi is married into the Anoa'i family. She's one of them. This isn't random. This isn't just an alliance. This is blood. This is war being declared by the Anoa'i dynasty. Let's talk about why these two names, Jey Uso and Naomi, matter more than just surprise appearances. Jey Uso isn't just a tag team specialist. He's not just Roman's cousin. He's the soul of the original bloodline story. When Reigns first crowned himself the tribal chief, it was Jey who bent the knee first, and hardest. He went through hell, physically and emotionally, to fall in line under Roman. That wasn't just kayfabe. That was WWE storytelling at its most emotionally raw. And when the bloodline fractured after WrestleMania 41, it was Jey who finally said enough. He walked out, disillusioned. No turn. No betrayal. Just silence. The kind that hurt more than anything. Fans assumed he was gone. That maybe his arc had ended. But Jey didn't vanish. He recalibrated. And now, standing beside Roman again, of his own will, not out of pressure or guilt, Jey's return has weight. It isn't about reclaiming the past. It's about rewriting it. He's not the same cousin who was broken down to become main event Jey Uso. He's a soldier now. Chosen. Empowered. Fueled by rage and loyalty in equal measure. Then there's Naomi. Wrestling fans have long underestimated the weight of her story. A two-time SmackDown Women's Champion. One of the most athletic and charismatic performers on the roster. And someone who, for years, was boxed into gimmicks that never let her be what she truly was, dangerous. But here? With the hood pulled back? Standing in tactical gear, jaw clenched, eyes locked forward? Naomi wasn't a symbol. She was a storm. And the fact that she was standing in that ring, not as a supporting player but as an equal member of the new Shield, was monumental. This wasn't just about representation. It wasn't just about gender. It was about the very fabric of the Shield's mythology being rewritten. For the first time ever, a woman stood inside the faction once built on the backs of three men. Not as a valet. Not as a distraction. As a soldier. As family. Roman saw it too. The emotional arc of his face as he turned and looked at both of them, Jey and Naomi, said everything. This wasn't about nostalgia. It wasn't about clinging to past alliances. It was about choosing the right warriors for the war ahead. The postures said it all. Jey with the arms folded, eyes locked on Rollins like prey. Naomi with the silent fire in her stance, watching the carnage play out as if waiting for another round. And Roman, in the center, breathing heavily but still unbroken. Still standing. Still reigning. Across the ring, Rollins was pulled to his feet by Breakker, who'd finally recovered. Reed stumbled up beside him. All three leaned on each other. All three looked beaten. rattled, shook. Paul Heyman watched it unfold with something between awe and dread. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even shouting anymore. He was studying. Calculating. Realizing that he'd made a grave miscalculation. Not in Rollins' ability, but in underestimating what Roman would do in the face of betrayal. The Shield was never about tactics or tradition. It was about unity. And now, that unity had a new face. 3, in fact. As the final chaos settled, and the crowd began to simmer, Roman Reigns stood with Jey and Naomi beside him. No celebration. No theme music. No pyro. Just a stare. One that burned through the camera lens and right into every screen watching at home. The message? We're back. And we didn't come to play. Legacy of the original Shield. To understand the shockwaves of Roman Reigns reforming the Shield, you have to go back to the beginning. Before the championships. Before the betrayals. Before the tribal chiefs, architects, and lunatics. You have to go back to 2012. Survivor Series. November 18th. Indianapolis. CM Punk was defending his WWE Championship against Ryback and John Cena. The match was intense. Raw. Predictable. Until 3 black-clad figures jumped the barricade and changed the trajectory of the WWE forever. Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins. Dean Ambrose. They weren't announced. They weren't hyped with vignettes. They didn't have theme music. They had purpose. And they had impact. They put Ryback through a table and helped CM Punk retain his title. The next night on Raw, they made it clear they weren't here to play sides. They were here to disrupt. They were the Shield. A self-proclaimed task force of justice, correcting what they saw as corruption in WWE. From the beginning, they didn't move like other factions. They weren't just a trio of single stars lumped together. They moved like a unit. Their entrances were iconic. No music pyro, just a steady march through the crowd, tactical vests on, heads down, mission-focused. Each member had a defined role. Seth Rollins was the architect. The tactician. The man who orchestrated movement like a field general. Dean Ambrose, now known as Jon Moxley in AEW, was the lunatic. The wild card. Unpredictable, intense, always a second away from chaos. And Roman Reigns was the muscle. The powerhouse. The silent enforcer who smashed bodies and let his actions speak louder than any promo. Together, they were unstoppable. From late 2012 through mid-2014, they tore through the WWE roster like a tactical storm. They took out top names like John Cena, Sheamus, The Rock, The Undertaker, Daniel Bryan, and CM Punk. They didn't just win matches, they dismantled people. Triple powerbombs became their signature weapon. A calling card of destruction. But what made the Shield special wasn't just dominance. It was chemistry. They were believable. Fans bought into their brotherhood because it felt real. Because it was. Behind the scenes, the 3 had bonded in NXT. They came up through the same grind. They weren't just co-workers. They were soldiers in the same war. And for a while, it worked. They won the WWE Tag Team titles. The United States title. They clashed with Evolution in back-to-back classic matches in 2014, where they cleanly swept Triple H, Randy Orton, and Batista, 3 Hall of Famers, without breaking formation. The Shield, at that point, weren't just a faction. They were a revolution. Then came June 2, 2014. The night the Empire collapsed from the inside. It happened fast. Too fast for fans to believe it at first. The Shield had just finished a face-to-face with Evolution. The war seemed over. Respect, even, had been earned. Then Rollins grabbed a chair. And hit Roman Reigns in the back. The thud echoed. Dean Ambrose turned, eyes wide, and got the same treatment. In one moment, the most dominant trio in a decade died. Rollins sold it as evolution. As ambition. He called himself the architect, not just in name but in philosophy. He aligned with the authority. Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, and launched a solo career that catapulted him to main event status. Reigns and Ambrose were left to pick up the pieces. This betrayal didn't just fracture a faction. It rewired the WWE narrative. Fans didn't just boo Rollins, they felt betrayed themselves. Because the Shield wasn't a gimmick. It was a brotherhood. A bond. And he broke it for glory. Reigns responded by beginning his ascent as the face of the company. Vince McMahon anointed him, pushing him as the heir to John Cena. Main events at WrestleMania followed. So did Backlash. Not because Reigns lacked talent. But because fans hadn't healed from the Shield's collapse. The wound was still fresh. Ambrose went a different route. He spiraled into chaos. Feuds with Bray Wyatt. Hardcore matches. A run with the WWE title in 2016. But creative never gave him the leash he needed. By 2019, he left WWE altogether. Citing frustrations with storytelling and character limits, and re-emerged as Jon Moxley in AEW. But the shadow of the Shield never left. Every feud between any two of them felt bigger. More personal. More violent. Because it wasn't just about titles. It was about betrayal. It was about trust that once existed, and was shattered. Years passed. All three men became champions in their own right. But the Shield remained their origin point. A fixed moment in time that shaped everything after. In 2020, Roman Reigns flipped the narrative again. After a hiatus during the COVID-19 pandemic, he returned at SummerSlam with a new attitude. No smiles. No pandering. Just destruction. He aligned with Paul Heyman and claimed his seat at the head of the table, proclaiming himself the tribal chief of the Anoa'i family. It was a total reinvention. And it worked. The fans who once rejected him now saw him as untouchable. Because this Roman didn't need cheers. He didn't need approval. He needed control. Over the next 3 years, he built the Bloodline, a faction of family dominance. The Usos. Solo Sikoa. Himself. And Heyman, whispering in his ear like a serpent. They crushed the WWE roster. Roman held the Universal title for 1,316 days, merging it with the WWE Championship to become the undisputed champion. The Bloodline story became the most compelling arc in wrestling, period. And through it all, the memory of the Shield lingered. Fans speculated about a reunion. About what would happen if Reigns, Rollins, and Ambrose ever crossed paths again. But the truth was, the original Shield could never return. Too much had been broken. Too many scars. Too many betrayals. Which is why Night of Champions 2025 hit like a bolt of lightning through the bones of the WWE Universe. When Roman Reigns walked out flanked by two hooded figures, the silhouette was familiar. But it wasn't a nostalgia act. It was something more chilling. It was a signal. The Shield wasn't reborn. It had evolved. Reigns, once the quiet muscle, was now the general. The one betrayed was now the one building. And he didn't bring back old allies out of sentiment. He brought new ones, out of strategy. Out of necessity. Out of war. JUSO. Naomi. Not just new blood. But family. By choosing them, Roman was making a declaration. That the principles of the Shield, loyalty, unity, dominance, still matter. But the execution had changed. This wasn't about justice anymore. This was about vengeance. This was about reclaiming legacy, silencing betrayal, and restoring order in a WWE that had fractured under Rollins' ambition. And the WWE Universe? They felt it. Not because they missed the past. but because they saw the future. And it was terrifying. Rollins' original betrayal, June 2, 2014. Raw. Indianapolis, Indiana. The Shield had just achieved what few thought possible. Back-to-back victories over Evolution, Triple H, Batista, and Randy Orton. Clean wins. No controversy. No interference. Just raw dominance. It was a torch-passing moment. A generational shift. The old guard lost. The new breed stood tall. Roman Reigns. Dean Ambrose. Seth Rollins. 3 men standing in the ring, fists raised, united. And then, with the same precision that once made them brothers in destruction, everything came undone. Seth Rollins picked up a steel chair and swung it into Roman Reigns' back. The sound was sickening. Not just the chair meeting muscle, but the roar of betrayal detonating in the crowd like a bomb. Dean Ambrose turned, confused. Caught between reaction and denial. Then he caught the same chair. Twice. 3 times. The architect had burned his own blueprints. Rollins stood above his fallen brothers, panting, half shocked at his own decision, half satisfied. Triple H walked out from backstage, clapping slowly. Randy Orton stood at his side, smirking. And just like that, the Shield was dead. In WWE, betrayals aren't new. It's a sport built on them, allegiances shift, friendships crack, alliances crumble. But Rollins' turn wasn't just another swerve. It was a full-on assassination of one of the most protected storylines in years. Because fans didn't just love the Shield. They believed in it. For 18 months, Reigns, Rollins, and Ambrose had fought not just together, but for something bigger than gold. They weren't chasing titles. They were chasing accountability, violence, and dominance. They had chemistry, intensity, and mystique. And Rollins shattered that with a single swing. Let's talk about why that betrayal hurt more than most. For starters, it wasn't foreshadowed. There were no arguments. No creative tension. The Shield had just conquered Evolution. They were tighter than ever. And that's what made the betrayal so visceral. It came at the peak of their success. It wasn't a fracture born of frustration. It was cold. Surgical. Rollins didn't betray them because he was pushed too far. He did it because he could. Triple H recruited him. Saw in Seth the mind of a strategist, someone who could be molded into the future of WWE. The offer? Money. Power. Exposure. Solo titles. Seth took it. And instantly, everything that made the Shield sacred was broken. The weeks that followed weren't just about Rollins becoming a heel. They were about Reigns and Ambrose trying to make sense of it. Reigns didn't say much. He didn't have to. His fists did the talking. But you could see the shift, the guarded look in his eyes, the refusal to trust others, the walls going up. Ambrose, on the other hand, combusted. He became unpredictable. Rabid. His promos took on a chaotic energy. He stalked Rollins across arenas, refusing to let the betrayal go unanswered. WWE leaned into it. The feud between Rollins and Ambrose became deeply personal. The kind that didn't need titles to feel important. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about closure. About the pain of watching someone you bled with choose greed over loyalty. Rollins won the Money in the Bank briefcase that summer. He cashed in at Wrestlemania 31 in 2015, becoming WWE World Heavyweight Champion, midway through a match between Reigns and Brock Lesnar. He didn't just win the title. He stole the spotlight from Roman. Again. That pattern repeated for years. Rollins built a reputation not just as a competitor, but as a usurper. A man who could slip in at the moment of victory and twist it into his own. Reigns, meanwhile, was still being pushed as the heir to John Cena. But the boos grew louder. The fans hadn't forgiven him for not being Ambrose. Or not being Rollins. or not being the right choice. And through it all, the memory of that chair shot haunted every main event he stood in. The Shield reunion teases came and went. In 2017, all three men stood together again briefly. But injuries, outside deals, and creative stalls prevented it from ever reaching full impact. Even when they teamed up for a few six-man tags, the weight wasn't the same. Because that chair shot never got a real answer. Until now. Rollins' betrayal wasn't a one-time decision. It was a domino that triggered everything after. The rise of the Authority. The rise of Roman. The departure of Ambrose. The birth of Moxley. The formation of the Bloodline. The creation of the Architects faction. Every story in WWE's last 10 years connects back to that night in June 2014. And Rollins? He never apologized. Not once. He defended it. Mocked it. Built his persona around it. He wore the label, the Architect, like a badge of pride. Not because he constructed something, but because he dismantled everything. So when Roman Reigns returned at Night of Champions 2025 with a new Shield, the callback wasn't subtle. It was direct. Calculated. It was Roman saying, "I learned from the betrayal. And I've built something you can't break." Because Jey Uso and Naomi weren't just random picks. They were hand-selected. Jey had already been to hell and back under Roman's rule. He knew what it meant to bend, and to break. Naomi had faced her own battles, been overlooked, undervalued, and yet never compromised. This new Shield was about trust. Trust that Rollins threw away a decade ago. Trust Roman was rebuilding with family, not convenience. And that's why Rollins panicked the moment the lights went out. Because no matter how many titles he's won, no matter how many WrestleMania moments he's stolen, he'll always be the guy who cracked the Shield. Not the guy who carried it. Rise of the Tribal Chief, August 30, 2020. Payback. WWE's pandemic era was in full swing. No fans. LED screens filling the Thunderdome. Sterile silence replaced the roar of the crowd. Then Roman Reigns returned. After 5 months away, he showed up with a different energy. A different look. A different aura. No cheers. No smiles. No pandering. Just fury. And Paul Heyman by his side. Those 2 seconds on camera, Reigns glancing over his shoulder at Heyman with a cold smirk, rewrote everything. No promo needed. No beatdown. No explanation. That look said it all. Roman Reigns had finally stopped trying to be accepted. He was here to take. That night at Payback, he didn't even enter the triple threat match between Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt until it was half over. Then he signed the contract mid-match, stormed in, wrecked both men, and pinned Strowman to become Universal Champion. It was chaos. It was ruthless. And it was the beginning of the most dominant title reign in modern WWE history. Over the next 3 years, Reigns didn't just defend the title. He redefined it. Gone were the 5-minute, cookie-cutter matches. Gone were the forced babyface promos. This Reigns took his time. He controlled the pace. Every word he said felt earned. Every match had weight. Every victory felt like an execution. And behind him stood his blood. The Bloodline. Jey Uso was the first. Their feud in late 2020 set the tone. Roman didn't just beat Jey, he broke him. Emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. He told him to fall in line or be exiled. And Jey eventually said the words that would haunt him for years, "I quit." Jimmy Uso followed. Then came Solo Sikoa. And with Paul Heyman masterminding from the shadows, the Bloodline became less of a faction and more of a monarchy. Roman wasn't leading a team. He was commanding a dynasty. WWE bent around him. Storylines revolved around his orbit. Titles meant less unless Reigns acknowledged you. Commentary changed. Camera angles shifted. Even the rhythm of the show evolved to accommodate his slow-burning, theatrical dominance. He wasn't a superstar anymore. He was a presence. Matches with Kevin Owens, Daniel Bryan, Edge, Cesaro, and Brock Lesnar all ended the same way, Reigns standing tall, belt high, aura unshaken. Then came SummerSlam 2022. Brock Lesnar. Last man standing. A forklift. A ring torn from its foundation. Tables shattered. Weapons everywhere. And still, Reigns won. Because it wasn't about the match. It was about mythology. And by that point, Roman Reigns had become more than the face of WWE. He was its godfather. Then came Cody Rhodes. WrestleMania 39. 2023. The son of a legend. The American Nightmare. The man who left WWE, built his name elsewhere, and came back to finish the story. And for 30 minutes, it looked like he would. But Roman won again. Because the story wasn't Cody's to finish. Not yet. That was the brilliance of the Tribal Chief era. It subverted expectations without killing momentum. It let Roman stay untouchable while still elevating those around him. Everyone who stepped into his path. Owens, Bryan, Lesnar, Rhodes, came out of it more important than they entered. Because facing Roman wasn't just a match. It was a trial. But the real genius of this era wasn't just in dominance. It was in storytelling. The bloodline wasn't just a faction. It was a Shakespearean drama. Family. Betrayal. Power. Sacrifice. JUSO being forced to serve the cousin who broke him. Jimmy torn between loyalty to his brother and his blood. Solo Sikoa emerging as a silent assassin. Someone Reigns didn't control, but tolerated. And Paul Heyman, once the voice of Brock Lesnar, now whispering poison into the ears of the most powerful champion in the modern era. Reigns held the Universal title for 1,316 days. He unified it with the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 38, defeating Brock Lesnar in a match billed as the biggest WrestleMania main event of all time. He became the undisputed WWE Universal Champion. And he didn't just carry the belt. He carried the company. Ticket sales. Ratings. Merch. Everything surged when Roman was involved. But all kingdoms rot eventually. And for Reigns, it began at the top. Cracks started to show. Jey grew restless. Jimmy broke ranks. Sami Zayn, originally accepted as an outsider in the bloodline, sparked internal wars with his charisma and emotional complexity. Reigns played the manipulator, but slowly, his control began to slip. By WrestleMania 40, the story was no longer about dominance. It was about desperation. Trying to hold power with fingers clenched too tight. The fall didn't come immediately. It came slowly. One disobedient look at a time. One missed cue. One betrayal. One failure. And at WrestleMania 41, it finally collapsed. A triple threat match. Roman Reigns vs. Seth Rollins vs. CM Punk. 3 icons. 1 title. 1 crown. 1 empire on the line. Paul Heyman, ever the puppeteer, turned on Reigns mid-match. A low blow. A distraction. A steel chair left in the wrong place at the right time. Rollins capitalized with a curb stomp onto the championship belt. And just like that, after over 1,300 days, Reigns was no longer champion. Solo Sikoa declared himself the new tribal chief on SmackDown the following week. The Usos split. Heyman stood beside Rollins. And Roman vanished. No interviews. No tweets. No video packages. He went dark. The man who had been the face of WWE for 4 years disappeared like smoke in the wind. And that's when people started to ask, was that it? Was Roman Reigns done? Had the story reached its final chapter? Or was he just waiting? If you followed Roman Reigns long enough, you know the truth: he doesn't strike without purpose. He doesn't return without a plan. The silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. Because the tribal chief was never going to come back the same. And when he did, at Night of Champions 2025, it wasn't to reclaim the past. It was to build something new.